Imagine a silent settlement. Rough-hewn cottages stand empty, a cold hearth, a rusted cup, a child's toy abandoned in the dirt, and on a wooden post, a single word, carved by a desperate hand, Croatoan. This is the scene that greeted Governor John White in the summer of 1590, a scene that would freeze the blood of any leader and ignite a mystery that has burned for over 4 centuries. The entire population of the Roanoke Colony, 115 men, women, and children, had vanished without a trace. They were just gone. The lost colony of Roanoke is America's oldest unsolved mystery, a puzzle where the pieces seem to scatter the harder we look. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if the evidence was there all along, and we simply didn't have the context to understand it? Today, we're not just retelling the ghost story. We are going to examine what the evidence, both old and new, suggests really happened on the shores of Roanoke Island. To understand the disappearance, we must first understand the dream. It was the late 16th century, and England was a desperate underdog in the race for New World riches. Spain's empire groaned with Aztec gold, and Queen Elizabeth I needed a foothold in America. Her courtier, Sir Walter Raleigh, was given the charter. His mission? Establish a permanent settlement, a base for privateering against Spanish ships, and a claim to the vast, unknown continent. The first expedition in 1584 was one of exploration. The Englishmen who landed were met by the Croatoan people, led by a chief named Wingina. The reports sent back to England were glowing. They described a land of immense beauty and abundance, a Virginia in honor of the Virgin Queen. It seemed perfect. The second expedition in 1585 was military, a group of soldiers under Governor Ralph Lane. They built a small fort on Roanoke Island, but the relationship with the Croatoan quickly soured. The English, dependent on the natives for food, but arrogant in their demands, turned from guests into oppressors. The situation escalated into violence, culminating in the assassination of Chief Wingina by the English. When Sir Francis Drake's fleet happened to stop by in 1586, Lane and his men abandoned the post and sailed home. The first attempt had ended in failure and bloodshed, but Raleigh was undeterred. The next attempt would be different. This would be a true colony, a community of families, a permanent city of Raleigh. In 1587, a group of settlers, farmers, craftsmen, and families sailed for the New World. Led by Governor John White, they intended for the Chesapeake Bay, but the ship's captain forced them off at Roanoke Island, a place already shadowed by past conflict. They tried to make a home, mending ties with some local tribes, but after a violent misunderstanding, their situation grew desperate. The colonists convinced a heartbroken John White to sail to England for help. He left behind his daughter, Eleanor, and his newborn granddaughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in America. He promised a quick return, but it was a promise he could never keep. Governor White's return to England was catastrophically timed. He arrived just as the Spanish Armada threatened invasion, and every ship was seized for war. Stranded for 3 agonizing years, he finally secured passage back to Roanoke in 1590, only to find the settlement empty. The clues were there just as planned. The word Croatoan was carved on a post, with K-R-O on a tree. Crucially, there was no Maltese cross, the sign for distress. The evidence pointed to a voluntary move to Croatoan Island, but White never reached them. A storm was brewing, and the ship's captain, laden with Spanish plunder, refused to delay. He sailed for England, forcing White to abandon his search and leaving the colonists' fate a mystery. For centuries, the puzzle seemed unsolvable. Were they killed by the Spanish? Wiped out by disease? Victims of a local chief? The theories were endless. The truth, however, was hidden not in the old stories, but in the ground itself. The word Croatoan was the biggest clue, but for a long time, it was just a word. Where was the proof? The first major breakthrough came not from Roanoke Island, but from 50 miles inland on the coast of mainland North Carolina. For decades, a dedicated archaeologist named Mark Horton has been excavating a site known as Cape Creek on Hatteras Island, the very place once known as Croatoan. And what he and his team have found is staggering. They have uncovered a trove of Elizabethan artifacts mixed seamlessly with a large Croatoan village. We're not talking about a single coin that could have been traded. This is a collection of items that suggest prolonged cohabitation. They found the hilt of a rapier, a sword that would have belonged to an English gentleman. They found a signet ring, used to seal documents with wax, a deeply personal possession. They found pieces of a gun barrel, and most tellingly, a small writing slate that a child would have used for practice. These aren't lost trinkets. These are the belongings of a community that lived, worked, and died alongside the Croatoan people. The archaeological record strongly suggests that at least a significant portion of the Roanoke colonists did exactly what they said they would do. They went to live with their allies on Croatoan Island. What if the lost colony of Roanoke didn't vanish entirely? A hidden clue on a 400-year-old map suggests a divide and survive strategy. Researchers found a secret patch on John White's map, revealing a potential second settlement location, now called Site X. When archaeologists dug there, they discovered Elizabethan artifacts, exactly what the colonists would have had. This suggests a tantalizing possibility. The group may have split up. Some sought safety with the Croatoan tribe, while a smaller group went inland to establish a permanent foothold. Their plan to increase their chances of survival might just have worked. While archaeology gives us physical evidence, the native peoples of the region have carried their own histories for generations. The Lumbee tribe of North Carolina, who live in Robeson County, have long held an oral tradition that they are descended in part from the lost colonists. They point to their surnames, like Dial, Hyatt, and Dare, which bear a striking resemblance to names on the Roanoke passenger list. They speak of ancestors who talked in a book, a possible reference to literacy, and who built square, two-story houses unlike the traditional native dwellings. In the 1880s, a historian named Hamilton Macmillan documented these stories, noting that the Lumbee had European features and used words that seemed to be Old English. While this evidence is not scientific, oral histories are a powerful and often overlooked historical record. They offer a narrative that aligns perfectly with the archaeological finds. The colonists were not lost, they were assimilated. So, let's assemble this new picture from the evidence. The traditional story of a single tragic massacre is likely wrong. The evidence points not to a dramatic end, but to a gradual assimilation. The scenario that best fits the facts is this. Facing starvation and continued hostility from some mainland tribes after Governor White's departure, the colonists made a rational choice. They followed their plan. The main group, likely including the families, packed up their belongings and sailed south to live with their Croatoan allies on Hatteras Island. There, over time, they intermarried and became part of the community. Their European goods entered the native trade networks, and their knowledge of English, of metalworking, of writing, slowly blended with Croatoan culture. Meanwhile, a smaller, more mobile group may have traveled inland to the Site X location to establish an outpost, perhaps to maintain an English claim or to search for resources. This group may have had a different fate. They could have been attacked, or they too may have eventually been assimilated into other tribes, their distinct identity fading over the generations. When John Smith and the Jamestown settlers arrived 20 years later, in 1607, they heard stories from Powhatan chiefs about people who dressed like Englishmen and lived in towns to the south. They tried to find them, but by then, the Roanoke colonists were no longer English. They had become something new. They had become American. The mystery of the lost colony of Roanoke endures, not because there are no answers, but because the truth we are finding is more complex and more human than the simple myth of disappearance. The evidence suggests they didn't vanish into thin air. They vanished into America. Their story is not one of a tragic end, but of a remarkable beginning. It is the story of the first contact between English culture and Native American culture that ended not in immediate conflict, but in integration. The legacy of Eleanor Dare, Virginia Dare, and the 113 others is not a ghost story. It is a story of resilience, adaptation, and the incredible ability of people to survive against all odds. They were the first English colonists to put down roots in the New World, and in a profound way, their descendants are still here, their story woven into the very fabric of this land. The lost were in fact found. We just had to know where to look.